see the first preseason game a week from tomorrow, and you can listen to it right here on 97.3 ESPN. Phil Sheridan has been covering the Eagles since, I believe he told me, 1985. It's a long time, entering the 2016 season with a team, Phil, that probably looks a lot like a team you saw back in 1999, these practices resembling a lot of the Andy Reid era.
Yeah, there's no doubt that Doug Pederson is basically borrowing Andy Reid's blueprint here and trying to follow that. It's a little bit different, though. One of the things that was really striking about Andy's first camp was, we didn't know much about Andy as a guy. I mean, he was the quarterback's coach for the Green Bay Packers for a couple of years. I mean, coached tight ends before that. He'd never been a coordinator or head coach at any level. And so we were kind of, it was kind of a blank slate as far as we were all concerned. And that first training camp, we got out there, and Andy's standing there as he always does, kind of surveying everything. And they came out and hit for two full practices. The first day, the second day, and the third day, they had like 10 to 15 guys going for IVs and treatment and have to leave the field, all dehydrated and everything. It was a real announcement that, hey, this is how it's going to be. We're going to play this a certain way. And Doug Pederson a month or so ago told a lot of us that he was planning kind of the same approach. That he wanted to really do the really tough 3-4 days to start things off and then kind of ease up as he went. And so I was kind of anticipating, not the same because the rules have changed around the league. You can't do everything that Andy did. You don't even have 2 days anymore, for example. But I thought within the rules that Pederson would really get them cracking. But, they hit a little bit today, and they were in pads the first couple of days, and there was some contact, but nothing like the old days. And, no tackling, no real hard hitting. It was very, very, it was a lot more contact than Chip Kelly for the last 3 years, but it was nothing like the early days of the Andy Reid era. So yeah, the template, the plan is the same. The sort of the practice approach, philosophy is pretty much the same. But that real big sort of statement to start his tenure, which Andy Reid made back in 1999, we haven't really seen that. It's been different. Guys like Zach Ertz and Lane Johnson, we're talking to them today. I mean, they came into the NFL with Chip Kelly as their coach. They haven't hit since they were in college in practice. So these guys are. It's a bit of a sort of a culture shock for them in some ways, but they all seem to like it. They all seem to be pretty happy about doing it. And then they all kind of felt like, if you're going to play football, at some point you're going to have to hit. And so there's been a lot more than there was the last 3 years, but nothing like it used to be when Andy Reid was running things.
Phil, Doug Pederson, there was a ESPN poll that had him ranked last. I don't know how that's even possible. He hasn't coached a game yet. However, that being said, what are you learning about Doug? What impresses you? What worries you as you see him through now a week? I know it's very early to make a judgment on him, but what are some of the observations you have made of Doug Pederson as a head football coach?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, that poll you mentioned, I think, you said, as you said, he hasn't coached a game yet, so it's hard to say that about him. But I think basically that's why he hasn't got a lot of respect or credit around in that kind of thing, because he hasn't yet. There's nothing. He's such a blank slate for people to try to figure out who he is and what he's about. That it's easy to kind of, we'll put him down at the bottom because he hasn't done anything yet. And once he starts coaching games, and I think when Andy Reid took over in '99, people would have said pretty much the same thing about him. This guy, he's not ready to be an NFL head coach. He's never done it. Nobody could really expect a lot from him at that point. But within 2-3 years, they were going to the NFC Championship game, we were going to the playoffs every year. At that point, you could really make an assessment about him. I would say that the things that make me a little concerned about him is that he's really following Andy's plan and his way of doing things to a point, but I'm not always sure that that's always healthy. I mean, I think to some degree you have to kind of be your own guy and put your own stamp on things. We'll see as it develops how that changes and if he does things differently. There was a little episode where he told a bunch of reporters back in June that he was going to have Frank Reich in the booth on the headset, and Pederson was going to call the plays from the sideline into his earpiece, into his mouthpiece. Reich would get it in his headset and then relay it to the quarterback through the helmet speaker. And so it was a two-step sort of process to get a play call to the quarterback. And Doug said he was doing it that way because he wanted to have the other channel available to him to listen to the defensive stuff, what Jim Schwartz is saying on his headset, because he wanted to make sure he kept his hand on what was going on in the whole game. But it turns out that you can have more than two channels. That was his whole plan had nothing to do with the reality of the situation. So something like that, this is the way Andy did it, so he's going to do it that way. We're not really questioning why he did it or what he could do differently or better. And that's what makes me a little concerned because, if you really question why Andy did it that way, maybe he had a different reason for it and he wanted to do it. But, saying you only have two channels available to you when you have more than that and basing your whole plan for how to manage a game on misinformation, that's a little worrisome because Doug's kind of taking what Andy did and he's just kind of following it without really questioning some of it. Well, I think he's done well so far. Is he's made a big point of being, as a former player, as a guy who played here and knows the city and the organization and kind of what players like in the locker room, what they're like, what they want, what they need. He's done a pretty good job of selling that. I think the players that you talk to, you really get a sense that they feel like Chip was kind of a standoffish guy who would kind of, you could go talk to him in his office if you needed to, but he wasn't going to come walk around the hallways chatting with people or going to the locker room. I mean, Doug's made a point of going into the locker room every day, and he wants his assistant coaches to do the same. And that's kind of the players' private space in a way, but Andy and his staff were more than happy and comfortable walking around the locker room, and it's a chance to just sort of talk to players, kind of. Sometimes you walk past a guy. You see this in baseball clubhouses all the time too. Coaches are very good and managers are very good at kind of walking around the clubhouse and get a sense of where guys are. If a guy's sitting in his locker and he's in a bad mood, had a fight with somebody in his family, or something's on his mind. I mean, you find that out by being around guys, talking to them, making small talk. So Pederson has done a good job of kind of creating this new atmosphere that's a lot like the Andy Reid days in terms of just being open and sort of on the same level with the players. He feels like he's their boss, but he's got to also kind of get down to their level and communicate with them. And I think he's doing that part pretty well, and that can really pay a lot of dividends down the road as guys kind of buy into what you're selling.
Well, Phil, obviously Doug Pederson being a former player, he can relate to the guys a little bit better than an Andy Reid or even a Chip Kelly. So he's almost like a player's player's coach. He can relate to the guys because of his NFL experience. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and he was a backup quarterback for most of his career. He got a few opportunities, but not for very long. And so he's not been a star player. He's been a guy who's in the locker room who, is part of the whole thing, but not, at the top of it. And in that sense, he can kind of identify with all the guys. I mean, he was in a quarterback's meeting room with Brett Favre for all those years and with Dan Marino before that. So he knows what the very best players in the game have on their mind, what their lives are like, what their concerns are. But there's also a guy in the locker room who wasn't the backup quarterback and, could be talking to anybody else on the team and that kind of getting a feel for how it goes. So he understands the dynamics, the chemistry that goes on. Guys do or don't like each other. There's resentments that build up. This guy's playing more. I think I should be playing more than him or whatever. He's got a real good handle on all that kind of stuff, I think. And yeah, it's a tricky line to walk, to be the boss and to kind of lay down the law and enforce it when you have to as a coach. But the ability to kind of relate to players and get through to them and hear them, not just know what they're saying, but really fully grasp what they're going through is a big plus for him. And Chip Kelly did not do that, didn't bother with trying to do that. So I think for these players right now, it's really nice to have the other extreme where you have a guy that really kind of knows what you're dealing with and talks to you on that level. So it can be a real strength for him. The risk is that he has trouble kind of managing guys who's now become pals with. That's always a trick for coaches too. But we'll see. Something will come up at some point where Pederson has to kind of lay down the law or put his foot down about something. And that's when it'll be tested, and we'll see how he handles it.
Hey, Phil, would you say there's a different atmosphere up there from the Kelly camps?
Yeah, absolutely. Same with Chip's practices. Sometimes I felt when I was watching them like they were like a little show, like all the weird little techniques they did and the strange little bits of equipment that they came up with to kind of making drills different. I mean, those big fly swatter things that we used to call them. Guys just stood in front of quarterbacks with these big long pieces of material on their backs to kind of stand up and kind of create passing lanes in places where you couldn't throw the ball. I mean, there's none of that kind of stuff. There's none of that really sort of strange, you don't feel like you're watching some weird experiment in how to do football differently. Like Spacey came down and they're going to try to run a football practice. It's not like that. It's just the tried and true stuff that you're used to. And with Kelly, it was all about tempo. It was about guys running, running to every drill, running plays in rapid succession, and then getting off the field and going to do the next thing. And they were shorter practices. There wasn't much contact. With Pederson, if there's a play, if a play starts and he doesn't like either the formation, somebody was in the wrong spot, or the snap count was off, or the quarterback didn't go the right way with the ball, he just throws it there and makes him run it again. And he'll go over to the quarterback, explain what he wanted, what's wrong, what he wants to improve upon, whatever it is. And and after a play, they'll actually talk about it. Coaches on the field will talk to the players about what happened. And so they'll run a play, and it might be a minute or two before another play run. Well, with Kelly, they had to run 4 plays, and another time the Eagles run 2 plays sometimes. Because they're just on the field, and it's a different atmosphere. Now, they practice like 2.5 to 3 hours some of these days.
They okay with that? The players okay with that?
They seem to be fine with it so far, because with Kelly, it was all, everybody's running all the time, always involved in all the time. Everything was set up so that everybody seemed to be involved in doing something. Here, you might be on the field for 3 hours, but you're actually going to be standing there watching the first team or the second team, whatever you're not on, kind of do their bit, and you don't have to stand there and watch. So, that's how it usually is in the NFL, in my experience with everybody else I've ever covered. So it's much more typical of that. And when they go out and play, and they have some live hitting today, like I said, and that's pretty intense while they're on the field. But they're only on for like a handful of plays. They do that, and then they go, and the next crew comes out and does that part of the practice. So it's more intense physically in terms of hitting and that kind of stuff, but it's not as demanding in terms of keeping up with the tempo and constantly moving. It's okay to just stand there and listen to the coach for a few minutes, and go take a drink of water and whatever. And some veteran guys like Jason Peters, seemed like he hurt himself the other day, but it was really he just needed, he wanted to take a breather, and he just pulled himself out for a few snaps. You didn't do that with Chip Kelly. Everybody had to be going all the time. So it's a regular football practice, but there's some downtime, and guys have the ability to kind of talk, communicate, hear from the coaches, and I think the players are enjoying that. Again, right now, you have a lot of guys who've never done that in the NFL, the younger guys, some of the older guys who've been other places or were here before Chip got here. It's familiar to them. So right now they're all enjoying it because it's different from what they just had for 3 years. If they start not playing so well, then obviously they can start blaming this on whatever comes up during the season. But for now, at least, everybody seems like they're on board with it.
Phil Sheridan is with us, and you said communicate. That's a big word, Phil, something that didn't exist under Kelly.
Yeah, well, it was very different. And, that was the big thing that Jeff Lurie said, and the phrase that's going to haunt this organization for a while, either in a good way or a bad way, will be emotional intelligence, which was the phrase that Lurie dropped when he fired Chip Kelly. What he wanted in his next head coach was emotional intelligence. He wanted somebody who could just relate to people and communicate really well. And Pederson's really been very very active in that regard on the field. Now I'm sure that's just him coaching as he knows how to coach, but that's what Lurie wanted, and I'm sure Doug is making sure to follow up with that. And just by being explaining what you're doing and why you're doing it. With Kelly, it was more like, here's what we're doing, and everybody would kind of go do it, and then if they liked it, they would be happy to be doing it. If they didn't like it, they'd kind of go, well, why are we doing this? And then they kind of might explain some of the stuff they were doing, but there was so much, the sports science aspects of it, all these different ways of doing things. This is how marathon runners train and that kind of stuff. This is not a marathon. It's football. And some of the stuff that they tried to apply from other sports probably doesn't really work that well. So I think the fact that Pederson just kind of is himself, he's comfortable being himself, which is, not always easy to do for people. He didn't have a great playing career, but he feels like, I was an NFL quarterback. He didn't play that much, but he was an NFL quarterback. So, he kind of uses that, sort of pulpit to kind of preach from and say, like, I know what you're going through, and I know what we're doing, and here's why we're doing it. Someone asked him about, trying to make the practices a little more, it's just different a little bit from Andy Reid's plan that he's following so closely. And Pederson basically said, this is the schedule we use. He went to the NFC Championship game, 5 times, whatever it was, 8 years. This is it. This is the schedule. The Packers did it. The Eagles did it when I was here, and it's worked really well. So we're going to do it. And so in that sense, he's kind of down to earth. He's approachable, and he comes off as a really regular guy, where Chip was kind of like a snarky college professor kind of preaching at you all the time and lecturing you on all the stuff that he knew that you didn't. Doug's much more of he's a football coach, and he's happy to be doing it, and the players so far seem to enjoy that aspect of it.
Hey, Phil, Wendell Smallwood wasn't on the field today. What's up with Wendell? Is he hurt? And how will that affect the running back situation with Matthews being out as well?
Yeah, well, it could be a problem. They're painting it as a positive right now because these younger guys. Of course, Smallwood was one of them. But Smallwood has a quadriceps injury. It didn't sound real severe, but it might be a couple of days for him. Pederson kind of said today that he thinks Matthews will be back probably sometime this week, which would help them a lot because you basically have these young guys. And Kenyon Barner's been here a couple of years, but two undrafted rookies, Cedric O'Neal and Byron Maxwell, are getting a ton of reps, and they're out there. And they all seem to catch the ball really well, and they're getting a lot of opportunities to kind of be out on the field and get on film that they might not be getting if Matthews and Smallwood were both playing, practicing every day. So I'm looking at it as a plus for right now because it is giving younger guys some work that they wouldn't be getting, at least as much work. And when you get into the games though, and you get to the point where you actually have to start moving the football against another team and all that stuff, you kind of want your best guys to be in there. So Sproles, they don't overwork him, but he's able to kind of be the lead back, the starting back with the first group, and then the other guys get a lot of just a lot of time on the field. And for rookies learning a new offense, learning the NFL, it's probably not that bad at this point. So you like to get those guys back and on the field and healthy, but for now at least it's not the worst thing.
Hey Phil, how do the receivers look as far as being on the same page with Bradford?
Yeah, for the most part, pretty good. I think they install portions of the playbook in meetings every day, and then the next day they go out on the field and they kind of run those plays. So every now and again you'll see a little receiver go one way and a quarterback throw it the other way. That happens occasionally, but when that does happen, or when I've noticed it happening, it tends to be Wentz who's doing it. So I'm not really sure if it's the receiver going the wrong way or Wentz just making the wrong read or reading the play the wrong way. But with Bradford, everything seems to be pretty much in his grasp right now. There's a lot of short passes in this offense, and when he has a choice between long and short, he tends to take the short pass anyway. He did all last year, and throughout his career, he's been a guy that's more comfortable throwing short and taking the easier, shorter throw. He's been really accurate and seems to be very comfortable doing it. And the receivers, for the most part, and there's a bunch of young receivers that are and then you're getting a lot of time with reps. The guy named Paul Hunter, for example, was running with the first team at times today, and I don't know much about him, but he made a couple of catches today. Caleb Jones is another rookie, undrafted rookie, made a terrific one-handed catch in the back of the end zone today, pass to Chase Daniel through. So there's still little flashes of what these guys can do. And for the most part, every now and again the ball's overthrown or underthrown or whatever, but not. They don't seem to be like on the where everybody's on the wrong. Running different plays at the same time. Or it's not that kind of chaos we occasionally see with a new scheme coming in.
Phil Sheridan, ESPN.com's NFL Nation with us here. You talk about some of those wide receivers. You just mentioned Paul Hunter and Caleb Jones. I'm sure our listening audience has never heard of them. You just said yourself, I don't know much about them. What about the guys we do know a little bit about? Should we be concerned then if Paul Hunter and Caleb Jones, they sound like two jobbers in a WWE match. Should we be concerned if those two guys are standing out at practice and the other guys aren't?
Yeah, well, I didn't mean to imply that the other guys necessarily weren't. Actually, Chris Givens has looked really good in terms of speed. That was the reason they kind of liked him and brought him in. He's a fast guy, and he really does have probably the best speed on the team as far as the wideouts go. And he's caught a lot of passes and done a lot of first team work. And Ruben Randall may not be as fast as Givens or as fast as you might like your receivers to be, but he's made a lot of really athletic and acrobatic catches and stuff. He made a great one-handed catch the other day. They got a lot of oohs and ahs from the crowd that was there. And he also a guy that catches the ball like away from his body, just kind of snatches it out of the air. Really good hands that way. So Ruben Randall looked good. Jordan Matthews has been the guy we've seen for the last couple of years. I mean, he's extremely reliable. He's been in the slot a lot. So he's catching a lot of short passes over the middle, and he's kind of been the player that he's always been. I have not, Josh Huff I've seen kind of go up and down a little bit, some drops here and there, and looks like he kind of gets lost on certain plays, which has always been the case with him. And Nelson Aguilar, I've generally been impressed with what I've seen of him. They really would, it would help them a lot if Nelson Aguilar could have a really good second season and be, kind of emerge as the number one wide receiver with this team. That would really, take them quite a distance from where they were last year in terms of their wide receiver skill set. But, he's looked pretty good. I mean, I wouldn't say that he's been the best receiver out there, but he's been solid and showing signs of promise.
Talking with Phil Sheridan here. And, one thing, the safety spot, they got McLeod, they got Jenkins. But what's left after that? I mean, I don't know. Much like Paul Hunter and Caleb, I love those two names that you threw out, Phil. What's behind the safeties? Because I don't know that there's a whole heck of a lot of knowledge at who the second team guys are. Who's back? If one of those two starters got hurt, who are we looking at?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And you have guys like Ed Reynolds and Jalen Watkins who were here last year, and they're draft picks for the team and hadn't really gotten to be top level, had not been first team type guys the last couple of years, but they're still here. Chris Maridos is still here, more of a special teams guy the last couple of years with the team, but he has some ability to say. He brought up a pass in the end zone today. It was a pretty nice play on his part. As a pass, it was Carson for Zach Ertz, and he nicely even played to swat the ball away. So yeah, the depth isn't quite what you probably want. Blake Countess, the rookie draft pick. He's out there quite a bit. There's a guy named Nick Perry who they signed fairly late, and I don't remember him being at OTAs or in the minicamp, but he's made a play or two as well, kind of broke up a pass here and there. So there's a couple of guys out there that, they're showing some signs. But Malcolm Jenkins and Rodney McLeod, those two starters, they give you probably the best starting safeties Eagles have had since Brian Dawkins' heyday, and McLeod's been all over the place. He's really been an impressive guy to watch in camp. He hits people, and he's not been afraid to hit guys, even if they're not really doing live hitting in certain drills. He'll still take a shot at a guy here and there, and he's intercepted a couple passes, and just seems to be a guy that's always around the ball. And of course, Jenkins is a guy that we all kind of know. But in training camp, you tend to notice guys that you haven't noticed before, and McLeod, kind of watching him because I've never seen him play that much. I've been really impressed with what he brings to the table. The depth is not ideal at that position for them, but out of that group of guys, if they can get one or two of them that can really fill in and play when needed, that'll get them through at least through this season.
All right, Phil Sheridan here on the Sports Bash, 97.3 ESPN, with a look at Eagles camp from the NovaCare Center, with a lot of updates as they get ready for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, August 11th here on 97.3. Always a pleasure, Phil. Look forward to talking to you again this year.
All right, thanks, guys.